Let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone come up to you and say, "Hey, Pastor, I see a need for this ministry"? And your first thought is, well, who's going to lead it? Maybe you've been on the other side. You had a dream to serve, but no one gave you a chance. What if I told you some of the biggest ministries out there started because a pastor said, yes, go for it? And here's the thing. It doesn't just apply to church growth, but it also applies to recovery as well. When someone steps into their calling, whether it's leading a ministry or sharing their testimony, it creates a ripple effect of healing and restoration. Today, we're going to talk about investing in others and how it can change everything in our ministries, in our recoveries, in our lives. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Pastors in Recovery, a podcast dedicated to ministry leaders and pastors navigating the challenges of their own hurts, hang-ups, and habits. Hosted by John Hammond, a grateful believer in Jesus Christ and a pastor on the road of recovery. This space is here to remind you that God's grace is bigger than any struggle. Each episode brings real stories of redemption, practical tools for healing, and encouragement rooted in Christ's promise of renewal. You don't have to walk this journey alone. Let's explore how God meets us in our brokenness and brings light to our darkest moments. Welcome to the conversation.
First off, let's talk about Rick Warren and Tommy Barnett's approach. If it's in your heart, you lead it. I read the book by Rick Warren when he first started Saddleback, and it's interesting how he encouraged those with a vision to own it. Instead of taking on every ministry himself, turning people away, he would empower them to step into their calling. A great example of this is the launching of Celebrate Recovery with John Baker. When John Baker approached him, John had this idea. It's like, man, I've been dealing with my own recovery with alcoholism, and AA just is not doing enough for me. I need a Christian recovery group. Why don't we start a Christian recovery group? And well, Rick says, well, why don't you start a Christian recovery group? And now there are over 35,000 Celebrate Recoveries around the world because of Rick's openness. Another example, which is interesting, is Tommy Barnett's philosophy. He used to be the leader at First Assembly in Phoenix, and he grew this church using the principle, there's a miracle in the house. I remember reading that book by him, and the thing that's curious about it is that he believed that every ministry the church needed was already within the people God had sent. Well, actually, this is quite biblical. If you look at the relationship between Moses and Jethro in Exodus 18, Jethro observed Moses single-handedly handling disputes from morning to evening. Seeing this unsustainable burden, what did he do? He advised Moses to appoint capable, trustworthy men to serve as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. This delegation ensured that the people's needs were met while allowing Moses to focus on critical leadership tasks. Moses implemented this system, lightening his load and preventing burnout. This principle highlights the power of shared leadership and releasing ministry to others. But what happens to the pastor who turns away people who come to him and say, hey, I want to serve in this ministry, or I have this need, or I see the need, I want to fill it? What about the people that are being turned away? What happens to them? So to bring kind of an application to pastors, I want you to listen to this. When someone sees a need and presents it to you, your job isn't to take it on, it's to equip them to lead it. Now, I understand. We want to be careful who we put in leadership. That all makes sense. And in the biblical example with Moses and Jethro, it was clear that it says very clearly, appoint capable, trustworthy men to serve as officials. Capable and trustworthy. And the thing is that a lot of the people that come to you are capable and trustworthy, but are they also a threat? So the real question is, do people in your congregation see you as an approachable to share their dreams, or do you have a reputation for shutting them down? Many of the impactful ministries at Saddleback and Phoenix First Assembly were started and led by volunteers who had a dream in their heart and the courage to approach the pastor. Here's the key question for you. Are we hoarding ministry or multiplying leaders? That leads me to the second thought. When the church says no, but God says go. There was this young leader who had a vision for a youth mission organization. Their denomination isn't interested, so they leave, they pursue their calling, and now their organization reaches thousands around the world. This is real. I'm not making this one up. I also read a book about this, and it's about Lauren Cunningham and Youth with a Mission, the missed opportunity. The church could have had supported and shaped this movement, but instead closed the door. I want to encourage you, if God has placed something in your heart, don't let humans' rejection stop you. Maybe this organization wasn't needed, and maybe it was better that he did go outside so he could have more base of different denominations to be involved in this ministry. And that may be true for other ministries as well. But if you've been rejected by humans on something that God has called you to, what does that do to your recovery? What does that do to you? Do you feel like giving up? Do you feel discouraged? Or is God challenging you to step out, be courageous, and go for it? And for pastors, are we open to new ideas and callings in our church? Or do we dismiss them out of fear or out of control? And that leads me to the third idea, the worship pastor that never was. So imagine there's a pastor in a small church, a little community, and he's pretty much doing it all. He's the custodian. He preaches on Sundays and Sunday nights, and he does Wednesday night Bible study. And then on Sunday morning, he pulls out his hymnal and he leads worship. Well, then someone with experience comes into the church and offers to help, but the pastor keeps the role to himself. The worship leader leaves very discouraged. Well, what could have happened? That person could have built a strong worship team. The pastor could have focused on preaching and grown in his gift. The entire church could have been strengthened. Lesson here, when we hold on too tightly, we choke growth. The key takeaway here is letting others lead doesn't lessen our calling, it strengthens it. That person who's discouraged and walks away because you didn't allow them to lead worship, what happens to their recovery? What happens inside their heart? Do they become discouraged? And what about you? When you hold on and you don't delegate, what happens to you? Do you have a stronger sense of control? How is that helping you in your growth in ministry to give things away, to trust others, and to build and disciple? Because God has called us to be shepherds, to equip the saints, to do what? To watch us do the work of the ministry? No, to do the work of the ministry. And that leads me to the final point here, and that is number 4. Egos stop growth. Egos stop recovery. So how does ego kill ministry? Leaders begin to feel validated by doing it all. It's like, look at me, man. I did it all. Look at me. Look at the name I gave for myself. Yet, the fear of letting go causes burnout. How many pastors go for 3 years or 4 years, and then they leave as they go to the next church, and they do the same thing over again, and they burn out, and they leave, and they do the next thing. And so in their lifetime, they pastored 10 churches. Control issues is really the problem here. We're pushing away capable leaders. Power and control. What does power do for us? It gives us pride, and it pushes other people away. That isn't the way God would want us to lead, right? It's more of a matter of faith and trust in God that He's bringing people our way to lighten our load and allow them to serve in ministry as well. In fact, that's the sin that Satan had, is to become like God. But in becoming like God, he became less like God. In the same way, when we try to do everything ourselves, we become less like Jesus. Also, I want you to think about in recovery, in step 12, it says, basically, we're helping others grow. That's part of our own healing and when we let them grow. So pastors, I'm asking you right now, what ministries are you holding on to that someone else could lead? Who in your church has a passion that you've overlooked? What ministry could thrive if you let go and equip someone else? What dream have you let die because someone else said no? Maybe it's time to pursue it again. I encourage you today, invest in others. It doesn't just help them, it frees you to step deeper into your calling. Jesus built leaders, not just followers. Our job as pastors is to do the same. If we invest in others, the kingdom grows. If we hold on too tightly, we hold it back. Thanks for joining today's episode of Pastor's Recovery. If this episode resonated with you, share it with another pastor or leader. Keep leading well, keep recovering, and remember, we're in this together. Hey, I want to talk to you about our new Supporters Club. Would you be interested in joining our Supporters Club? For just $2 a month through Spreaker, you'll gain access to bonus podcasts and help cover the cost of production of this podcast. Your support makes this podcast possible. Sign up today and be part of something bigger.